Hello, I'm Claudine Wong, anchor for KTVU Channel 2 and your moderator today. Welcome to a roundtable of candidates running for the State Assembly, District 11. District 11 consists of the whole county of Solano and portions of Contra, Costa, and Sacramento counties surrounding the Delta. This district includes the city of Dixon, Suisun City, Fairfield, Benicia, Oakley, Vacaville, Vallejo, and Rio Vista. Today's roundtable is sponsored by the Contra Costa County Elections Division, the League of Women Voters Diablo Valley, and the League of Women Voters West Contra Costa County, and Contra Costa County Television with support from the cities of Concord and Walnut Creek. We're recording this roundtable live in the Martinez studios of Contra Costa Television, and there are 4 candidates certified on the Secretary of State's website at the time of this taping. They are David Ennis, Lori D. Wilson, Wanda Wallace, and Jeffrey Flack. Wanda Wallace and Jeffrey Flack could not join us today. Now, prior to the start of the program, the candidates drew lots to determine their speaking order. They're going to get 1-minute statements. We want to welcome Lori Wilson and David Ennis to this moderated forum. And Lori Wilson, we'll start with your 1-minute opening statement.
Thank you. I'm Lori Wilson, and I am the current Assembly member for District 11. I've had the distinct honor of serving in this capacity for over 22 months, and it really has been a pleasure. But prior to that, I was the mayor of Suisun City. I served there as a local leader for 12 years, starting as a commissioner on the Parks and Rec Commission. I like to joke, the fun one. And then on to council, where I served 6 years as vice mayor before being elected to mayor. Really excited to be able to have this long record of public service, as well as working in private industry. I've served for over 12 years leading the financial operations for home builders. Prior to that, having served as the chief accountant for a fair housing nonprofit. I am very passionate about housing, as well as mental health, but primarily I focus on quality of life. I believe everyone has a right to a high quality of life. Everyone has a right to define what that looks like for themselves, and it's my job as a government leader to facilitate that. Thank you, and I look forward to the robust discussion today.
Yeah, certainly a lot to talk about. Thank you, Lori Wilson. Dave Ennis, your opening statement.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Ennis, and I'm running for this position because I really feel we have to fix the mess created by our existing system of the past 30 years. Our unsustainable policies resulted in an economy that displaces existing workers when their livelihood is disrupted and jobs move out. Cycle after cycle, starting in Palo Alto and moving all the way up into Central and Northern California. We've seen prices of housing going up. We've seen imported wages for imported workers, and I think we need to address the issues that drive everybody in this crazy. I agree with Lori about the affordable housing. That is also my number one priority. I've spent the last 5 years working for FEMA on hazard mitigation grants, preventing things like wildfires and floods from affecting urban infrastructure. And we can get some free money out of the federal government, and I'd like to help you do that.
Okay, so let's tackle some of these issues and really get right into this discussion. You mentioned, Dave, about housing. So I'd love to start with that discussion if we can. I'm going to throw it to you in terms of how, when we talk about housing, there's a lot of issues of affordable housing, very impactful for the entire Bay Area, not just District 11. And tell me where your plans are and what priorities you have to address that issue.
Well, there's a number of key issues, but the first one is to get the zoning to accommodate that. So we have to have higher apartments. We have to have closer together communities. We can't give everybody a free backyard anymore because we haven't got any room. And everybody likes those 3-bedroom houses with a pool, but there's just no room for any more of those houses. And we need to address that. In the meantime, our homeless problem is getting worse and worse because they can't obviously afford it, and people continue to want to move in because they can't afford anywhere else. So it's just a vicious cycle, and like I said, it's been going on for a long time. It's not just this district. But in order to fix it, we need to start with the zoning, okay? The homeless thing is a whole different matter. It's very closely related. But I think the housing is key. And so I was on a planning commission in San Leandro for a couple of years. And I recall those days. I know something about how the government works and who does what. And I think we need to facilitate that. For example, in Fairfield, we see a lot of the kind of development I was just talking about, whereas in Vallejo, I don't think we see very much of it. When I was reviewing these grants, one of the things I discovered was the communities who had built a track record year after year of improving their community resilience, their resilience to wildfires, their resilience to earthquakes, that those people had a much better chance of securing these federal fundings, which are competitive. Every city in California will be bidding against every other city for those. But the funds are growing. They've gone from a couple of $1 billion a year world or nationwide to almost $10 billion a year nationwide. And we just need to go after that. I think if we get hung up on all these other things and neglect that issue, that's our infrastructure. You can't neglect infrastructure forever. So that's my point.
Lori Wilson?
Yeah, when I think about how do we deal with the housing crisis that we have in the state of California, production is a key issue. How we need to produce more housing. And to Mr. Ennis's point, we do have to upzone, right? We have to have higher density in our communities and allow various communities to be able to do that. The issue is some communities don't. Right? There are certain communities that like their single family detached neighborhood with as he said, the 3 bedrooms and a pool. And so that's why I think it's important that state policy is that we produce more housing and that we streamline the process to be able to allow cities to produce more housing and even force in some areas cities to produce. I love the county of Solano because they're really great at it all throughout the county. And there's pockets within Contra Costa that are really good at producing housing at a local level. But we definitely have to make sure that at the state level, when we look at state policy, is we need to streamline housing production as well as not do it so that it impacts local control. I come from local government, so I appreciate that. But we also have to ensure that recognizing that the state plays a part. I had the opportunity to serve in private industry and home building where I led the financial operations. So I've led projects from all the way from, identifying land to acquisition, all the way to when you finally build a home on it. And I think there's a role for the government to play in each step of that. There are a number of underutilized properties, not only from local governments like cities and counties, but there's underutilized properties from the state where we can build more housing and we can make it affordable. There are down payment assistance programs that the state needs to fund to ensure that, first time home buyers, first generation home buyers are able to purchase homes in our state because there is a cost of living issue and it drives directly to what it costs to purchase a home now. And that primarily is the cost of building. We look at what it costs to import, the number of goods that we're importing that goes into home building. We as a state have to play a role in addressing that issue because if we don't drive down the cost to build homes, we'll never drive down the cost to buy homes.
Can I follow up the question about where you think it's the city's responsibility, the county, and where the state should maybe step in or step out?
I look at it as the state provides a framework for housing production, for streamlining, so that every city has a blueprint. Now, within that city, every city knows its character, where I might look at it from a state point of view and say, well, why isn't there something on that property that's underutilized? You should build there. But you as a community, the local leaders know why that property is vacant, why you shouldn't build on that property, or why something else needs to be there. I know when I was a local leader in Suisun City, people were like, well, this is blank, this is blank. Well, we have a lot of housing in Suisun City, even more when I became mayor. There are 6 different projects that are actively being built right now that were part of my leadership in the city. But there are certain spots that were reserved for commercial that the city happened to own. The state wants us to say, hey, it has to be housing. Well, we're producing enough housing. We need to produce commercial. So I think at a local government, when it comes to land use planning, they know their community characteristics, what type of community they're trying to build. And as long as they're building that community for everyone, they should have the flexibility to do that. Where I think the state comes in is it builds a framework that all cities have to have a certain type level of housing, be able to meet the needs of their community and do it within a framework that's consistent no matter whether you're in LA or Suisun City or Solano, or Vacaville or even Oakley.
Yep. Dave, where do you stand in terms of where, as a representative of District 11, you'd say this is where you step into the space versus where a council member or a county supervisor would be doing that otherwise?
Well, I agree with Lori about the separation of who does what. I mean, that's pretty clear. It's always been that way. It hasn't changed in a long time.
But federal funding, you said that would be an area that you'd want to
Yeah,
really step in
well,
on.
the nice thing about federal funding is it doesn't affect the taxpayers in the local district, right? And so there are these competitive grants, Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities, they're called BRIC, okay? And when I was working at FEMA, I worked for the people who were doing that. And so these hazard mitigation grants, we're trying to mitigate against future disasters. We don't want to buy or develop a community that's going to burn up at the next wildfire or go underwater at the next flood. We've got a lot of flood issues here. Wait till the water goes up 2 feet. I don't know what's going to happen with all those levees, right? I don't know what's going to happen with our drainage system. But if it doesn't happen, I know what's going to happen, and that's going to be really awful. So this might be 10 or 20 years out, and it's not something we want to necessarily get our taxpayers to spend for today. But if we could get these federal grants and only have to pay 10% at the local level, we ought to do that. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that and to realize that it's competitive, that it's regional, that we ought to have a district and county-wide master plan. They need to agree with one another, the ones in Contra Costa County as well as the ones in Solano County. And Contra Costa is actually ahead right now. Solano County has this slow growth initiative or no growth initiative, and they're very adamant that they want to do this. They've got a regional plan that was put together in 2008, which supplanted another plan 20 years prior. So this has been 40 years of basically the same old thing, and that's up for discussion. It's time to renew that. It's 20 years old. And so if you look at the things that have happened in this county, one real big thing is we've gone from being a moderate-sized pond with a few little fish to a moderate-sized pond with one great big fish. And that's going to be a tough issue to deal with. I don't know where it's going to come out, but we need to address it, and it needs to be part of our plan.
Just to piggyback, I think, we have a district that is beautiful and has a great number of open space and green spaces. And I think, growth limits within communities is good because you get the green belt and it's primarily filled with agriculture, which we know that California is the breadbasket for the entire world. So I think that I think we have to have smart growth and ensure that we're building the housing that is needed not only for today but for the future, but we have cities who still have room to be able to do that in. One thing I'd like to piggyback on what Mr. Ennis said about levees, and divert it just slightly, because in District 11 we have the Delta. It is the heart of our district as well as a strategic water supply for the entire state. And the levee infrastructure is failing. And so Mr. Ennis is right in terms of we have to leverage federal dollars to be able to build that infrastructure. We cannot go it alone. We need federal dollars, state dollars, local dollars to ensure that our levee system is secure, because we are just one earthquake away from not only decimating the Delta that is beneficial to the people who live around it, but really for the entire state. So there needs to be that level of an infrastructure.
You have levees, you have Highway 37?
We have Highway 37 that, yes, and that I recently had the opportunity to go out and visit and see firsthand. I drive through it a lot. I never had to stop on the roads and see how precarious the situation is. I knew it just as a local leader. I served on Solano Transportation Authority.
What's your solution for Highway 37?
Well, I think that first of all, we need to leverage the federal system to be able to have the resources to be able to raise up where appropriate. There's a really great plan for Highway 37. It's one portion of it is widening a tunnel to allow for environmental concerns, to allow more water to be, what's the word I'm trying to use, but basically to take it out of the floodplain.
Yes.
And there is a great system for that. The issue right now, there's a great plan for that. The issue right now is funding.
Yep.
So we're working with our federal partners, and there has been a lot of discussion. We are not on the same page on the price tag of the project or the timing of the project, but for me, it is imperative. There are
What
so
page
many.
are you on with Highway 37?
It needs to be, we need the investment and we need it now. There are black and brown people who use that highway to access jobs. And it's, if you look at the city of Vallejo, it is a community of concern, and they are accessing jobs. And right now there's a 2-hour commute just to get
Yes.
from one side to the other.
I want to give you a chance to weigh in on Highway 37 as well.
We need to elevate it. I agree. And
That's the
and
plan
it's-
you support and timing?
Yeah, the timing can't be too early. We can't predict when the next great big flood's going to happen, but every day we wait is a day closer to it. And the difficulty is, particularly in California, where we have the CEQA environmental regulations, that basically doubles the time to do any project. I'd like to see it shortened. You can streamline to a certain point, and eventually the environmentalists come up and say, no, that's too much. And then when that happens, it disrupts the whole program. Because every time you delay a project like that, the price triples. So the sooner the better. That's why I like this idea about building resilient infrastructure communities, because you really have to prove that there's a cost-benefit analysis. And that's what I've been doing for 5 years. And I can spot a good one from about 1 mile away. So that's my point, is that it's federal funding, it's not local. It doesn't take a lot of your annual budget just to put together some plans.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we hit any other budget priorities that you think in terms of your list of things that are important. You know, we have touched on housing, we've touched on the Delta, we've touched on some of the infrastructure. What else rises to where you're saying this is what we need to address, and there's no more time in terms of waiting to address it? We have crime, we have homelessness, we have a lot of different issues. Lori, is there?
Well, I think to that point, crime, public safety, I think people are really concerned at the level of, retail theft and violence that they're seeing, and not violence like murders and things like that, but in terms of where people have a general sense of, if I walk in a community, do I feel safe? Is there going to be some level of petty violence against me? And so I think there needs to be an investment in our police force. You know, I strongly believe, as having served as a local mayor before, in community policing and investment in our police.
From a
police
state
agents.
level?
Absolutely. I think that we need to ensure that the standards that we have for our policing is high. You know, I was, heartened that during my time as a leader, the education level was changed to where, you had to have a college degree in order to get into policing. That's necessary. Give them the training that they need, and then have consistent policies that run the gamut throughout the state. There's still a lot of discretion within each police department of how they run their police department. That should be standardized. So no matter what community you should be, no matter what community you're from, you know what you're going to experience when you go into a community.
I don't have near the experience that Lori does on this subject, so I'll just admit that flat out, okay? But what I've noticed that really bothers me a lot is that we've just discovered a $68 billion deficit. Whoops, it's a $32 billion deficit. Oh, there's another $32 billion that went to EDD during the whatever we call it, pandemic. And everybody just said, oh, okay. And so now Governor Newsom's running around and saying, it wasn't 68 billion, it's only 30, and we can put 16 billion of that in this rainy day fund that it took us 10 years to develop, and in 1 year we'll do that. And the governor says he's optimistic, so don't worry about it. And he's not going to deallocate these funds, he's just going to spread what was supposed to be good for 1 year over 3 years. That's going to affect every program we've got. So I do know enough, having been a businessman for quite a while, that when you cut budget, you have to cut something else, right? And I'm really worried about a lot of the social programs that we all think are important. Some people disagree about which ones should be first. We're going to be in an argument about which ones should be left.
So if you had to say,
I'd
this
say
is where I
balance,
would cut,
I'd say balance the budget down.
but where would you cut to do that?
Start with the governor and work right on down.
Well, I have to disagree in terms of the budget picture. So we as a state, this year I believe is our third highest budget. Last year was our second highest budget in terms of revenues. The issue really became last year when the tax filing moved from April to October. They use projections. A budget is always an estimate. And so they estimated that there was previously going to be a $100 billion surplus. But when the tax receipts came in, we found that it was less. So all this is, when I talk to voters about it, is imagine if I told you on Monday you were going to get $1,000. And then in your mind, you started thinking how you would spend it. And so you laid out all these ways that you would spend that $1,000. And then Monday came and I said, nope, sorry, no $1,000. Then you would go back and be like, the things that you thought of, I'm not going to be able to purchase. And so what the governor did this year was he determined all the ways that we were trying to spend that $100 billion surplus that we had allocated over 3 years. Then he came back and said, hey, that one-time monies, we're not going to be able to do that. This program where I was going to fund you 3 years, we're not going to be able to do that. And so we still have resources. Things still will be funded. Yes, we have to fight for protection and preservation, because in that $100 billion surplus, we actually got more. I mean, we were able to make strides in areas that we'll have to pull back from, but we still have significant resources in the state.
But if the same conversation came to you and said we need to cut, where's the first place you think it's doable to cut?
You know, I look at where you delay projects, and you know, I'm chair of transportation. As much as I want all the projects to occur and timely, you know, these are billion-dollar projects, and so it's easy to say, well, we're going to defer that highway expansion, we're going to defer that investment, than it is to say cut a child programs, because we know when we cut programs that benefit children or people in poverty, it exacerbates it later. We have to be proactive in that and preserve that, because the cost of that cut will hurt us for generations to come. Whereas delaying a $1 billion infrastructure project, you know, it hurts, but it doesn't hurt as a child going hungry.
Are there places where if they say, okay, we need to cut, you would also say, no, this needs to grow?
Unfortunately, I'd probably say most of them need to grow, and that's what makes it so painful. I think about the people who are running these nonprofits, right? And they'd rely primarily on grants and private donations. And they're doing a really good job, particularly in and around Vallejo. They're fabulous. And they depend on this funding. So to promise it to them and then take it away really inhibits their ability to hire people, to train people, to keep people, to pay the bills. And you know, all I can say is we've just got to get ready for a mindset that says this is going to hurt.
Is there a place that you push to grow if you need to delay even something else?
I think to the point, and I agree with you, Mr. Ennis, on nonprofits doing good work. We have an issue of doing one-time funding for nonprofits and making them scrap every year and spend a lot of resources to try to get additional grant funding. We need consistency in funding for our nonprofits, because they're on the front lines doing the work in our communities to ensure that no one is left behind. I know for me in my own life, I grew up in dysfunction and food insecurity, housing insecurity. It wasn't until I got stable in my late elementary where I was able to get good grades. I'm now a 47-year-old woman, state assembly member, you know, I have a successful life with successful children. It took, you know, over 40 years for that to realize that the investments that were made in elementary paid off later. But usually we tell nonprofits, tell us what you did this last year. There's no way to show the level of growth that's needed with just 1 year, the level of success in just 1 year. And so we need to provide consistent funding for our nonprofits. So if there's any way the state can do that, that'll be what I champion.
How sound would you say District 11 is? I will start with you.
Sound?
How sound? If you say, what is the state? If you were doing a state of the district,
You know, I think
what grade
that-
would you give it?
Oh my gosh, I would give our district a B. I think it's solid, and I think that there is always room to grow. I'm a hard teacher. I rarely would give A's, but so I give it a B. But I know the leaders there. The leaders are committed, trying hard to do the work, and the people are great. And it's a very diverse community, and that's our strength.
And what grade would you give your district?
I think we've got to consider that this brand new fish just landed in our pond, and how we're going to deal with that. And I don't have the answer yet. I'm going to be going to the breakfast next week, where we hear discussion from the chief of the California Forever
California
campaign.
Forever, which we
Yeah,
there's a big discussion that can be had totally separate on that outside of the
I thought you were telling me I
huge
wasn't allowed to
discussion about
talk about it.
California Forever.
I really don't want to talk about it because it's such a hot potato, but we have to address that. So that's a real big thing. And how we address that after 40 years of this no growth thing.
Yes. Can I
that's-
ask you really quickly before we have to go to your closing statements, are you in favor of California Forever?
No.
I have a healthy skepticism, so I'm neutral at this point.
Okay. It's a big discussion that needs to be had.
I-
All right.
I could change my mind, and I'm
Yes.
trying to keep an open
Okay.
mind. All right.
Well, thank you to all our candidates for being here to answer some of these really important questions from our constituents. So much more to talk about, a lot to be discussed, but each candidate will now have 2 minutes to make their closing statement, and Dave Ennis, we'll start with you.
I'd like to talk a little bit about my background in business. I ran a $100 million division of a company called Raychem in Menlo Park for most of the 90s, and we supplied products used by products or programs such as the 737, the Patriot missile, Black Hawk helicopter, M1 tank, etc. I furthered that career in Zodiac Aerospace in Santa Rosa, where during the last recession, we grew our headcount from 120 to 240. So those are 120 people that had lost their jobs. And I'm really proud of that. In the course of doing that, I do remember the days when I had to do a 20% cut. It was not easy. And it's not easy to answer the question, which one would you do first? Because you don't want to do any of them. So my point is, I'm used to being poor, right? And so if you're poor and you can get money from the federal government to do long-range things that have to happen, but they're long-range things, so you'll be able to eat tomorrow, but this has to happen. I think these federal funds, these BRIC funds, could be extremely helpful. And because of my experience in promoting communities to get their act together, to have a very good, coherent plan, regional plan, I think we could improve the way we do that, and I'm here to help.
Okay. Lori Wilson, your closing statement.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the voters out there. Thank you for being a part of democracy, for being engaged, for watching this program and watching this discussion. This is important, and I find it meaningful to be able to be in this place, to be able to talk to you. I've had the distinct pleasure of serving now as a local leader, a state leader, for now 14 years. And it's been an amazing experience to be able to improve the quality of life of people I serve, people like you. And I look forward to being able to do that more if you'll have me over the next few years. I've had this opportunity coming from the west side of Fresno as a little girl with food and home insecurities, being in a place of just surviving. And now to be a full-grown woman, thriving, being able to serve my community and to really build a California for everyone. As I've stated at the beginning, I highly value quality of life and improving people's quality of life. And I demonstrated that as a local leader over the last 12 years, and then now as an assembly member for the last 2 years. My very first bill that was signed into law was for the intellectually and developmentally disabled, recognizing that there was disparities within our services division, and writing a law to ensure that that wouldn't happen, that every single person that entered that program would get the care and services that they need. That's the kind of lawmaker I am. I represent those that have underserved, marginalized. But at the same time, I bring my background in business. I've had the pleasure of serving as a financial leader in business for over 12 years, with over 20 years in accounting and finance and budgeting in general. And so I know that as the leader in my community, as the leader at the state capitol, I've served in various leadership positions now, Treasurer of Transportation. I know I will get the job done, and I will ensure that you have a high quality of life. I've always been open and honest and transparent, and I look forward to engaging with you. Make sure you reach out to my office if you have anything you need related to the state, but if not, just follow me at electloriwilson.com.
All right. I'd like to thank Lori Wilson and Dave Ennis for participating in today's forum, so important. This does conclude today's candidate roundtable for the member of State Assembly District 11. Once again, let's go through your certified candidates. You have Dave Ennis, Lori Wilson, Wanda Wallace, and Jeffrey Flack. Wanda Wallace and Jeffrey Flack were not able to attend today. Now, for more information about the candidates, please go to vote411.org. To view this broadcast online or to get more voting information, you can go to contracostavote.gov/elections. I'm Claudine Wong from KTVU, your moderator today. I'd like to thank you for watching, and don't forget to vote on March 5th.